Hi there, it's Watchen, your favorite executive next door, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I teach ambitious Black women the unwritten rules of corporate America so that they can get as much from corporate America as they give to corporate America. So if you follow my personal page at ICUWatchen on Instagram or my business page at I Choose the Ladder on Instagram, then you know a little bit about how I went from a Liberian immigrant in 1991 to now being 1/3 of the executive leadership team at the WNBA team here in Chicago called the Chicago Sky. And I realized that I hadn't really talked much about how that happened for me or how I was able to make it happen. And so I thought the best way to launch my channel is to give you a little inside scoop or a little bit behind the curtain of what it took to actually be able to become a senior level executive who's worked for companies like Comedy Central and Yahoo and Ebony and Jet and the Chicago Sky. So a little bit about me. I was born in Liberia and my parents have been together since high school, which is wild to me because nobody's together since high school. And they decided that once one of them had a college education, that they would get married and have kids. And they did that. They actually both got their college degrees and then they had 4 children. I'm the third of the 4 children. And when I was 6 years old, there was a war that started in Liberia and my family lived through that war for 2 years, which is a story for a whole other time. But I came to the United States because my dad had worked as an intern at a company in Chicago when he was getting his master's in engineering, and they actually sponsored us to be able to come to Chicago. And if you know anything about immigration and the nightmare that it can be, I'm really grateful that was able to happen. We moved to the north side of Chicago, and my parents honestly didn't know much about American culture, about Americans, and they didn't plan for us to be here for more than 18 months. So a lot of the things that most professionals know to invest in, they just didn't know. It wasn't on their radar. So things like building a professional network or climbing the corporate ladder, like that just wasn't something that they thought about. What they thought about was keeping these 4 kids alive in a land that they knew nobody. And so survival is like what I was raised on. And what I've had to learn about the corporate space has largely been on my own, right? It was like trial and error, some luck, some God, mostly God. But my parents really couldn't help me in the ways that I needed to be helped. And in, I think 9th grade, we moved to the suburbs. And I feel like that's when I first started to suffer with like unknown mental health challenges, right? Specifically depression. I went from a Black and brown neighborhood, predominantly grew up around all Black and Hispanic people, to a suburb that was diverse. But it was diverse in that it was not a lot of Black and Hispanic people, but a lot of everybody else. And it just like, I felt out of place. All of a sudden, like I wasn't really prioritized. And so I ended up going to college through the Posse Foundation. And I think that's when I realized like what was possible in terms of career things. Like I got mentors, I learned about networking. I learned a lot about the unwritten rules of corporate because our mentors were senior white corporate leaders who had learned the game. And for whatever reason, they were intentional about putting us on. And I remember that one of my mentors at the time, I was like 18 and he was on the cover of Forbes. And I was just like, that's wild. But his advice to me was that your 20s are for learning, your 30s are for setting the foundation, and your 40s are about making real money. And at the time, and I was really young, like I was trying to get real money, right? And I thought that that I could somehow accelerate that process. And what I've learned is that that is true. Like usually you learn in your 20s, your 30s, you start to set the foundation. And then in your 40s, which I'm not there yet, is when you start to make real money. And when I went to college, like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Actually, that's a lie. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a talk show host. I wanted to be Oprah, but because I was too ashamed to say anything about it and didn't really think that I could make it happen, when people would ask me, I would say like, oh, I don't know, like maybe I want to be in communications or in entertainment. And so after college, I actually moved to LA with no job, right? But I had seen white kids do it on like 90210 and all those places, and they loaded up their cars and they got there and they were fine. I was like, I could do that. Like, I know some things, right? I've learned some things. I'm tough, I can do it. And so that's literally what I did. But one of the things that I learned early on because of that network with Posse was how important it was to cultivate a network. And so I had a solid network getting to LA. I ended up working for a casting director. She was the casting director for the Power Rangers at the time. And although LA did not agree with my spirit, I did learn a lot and made networking decisions that led me to be able to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. But after about 2 years, I was like, LA is not my ministry. So I moved to Comedy Central in New York. And a lot of times people are like, well, how did that happen? Again, it goes back to networking, right? So when I got to Comedy Central, it was because of a relationship that I had with the Posse Foundation, and the president of the network happened to be on the board, right? And so those relationships led to the Comedy Central job. They led to Hearst Digital, right? Which I did for a very short period of time, and we'll talk about transitioning after less than a year from a job to a job. From Hearst, I went to Yahoo, where I managed the #1 and #2 accounts for North America for them. And then I decided that I was ready to come on back to Chicago temporarily, which I thought I was coming back for a year. It's been almost 8 years, but like, that's not the point. But when I came back, again, because of the relationships that I've had, I was able to get a job. I interned with a bunch of places. I ended up working at Ebony and Jet as a consultant for a while. And there I met the founder, the owner of the WNBA team here in Chicago, grew a mentorship relationship with them, and was able to, at the right time, it was probably like 2 years later, 2.5 years later, I was asked to come and be part of the leadership team for the Sky. And I was there until I recently transitioned out of working there full time. But again, I'm still 1/3 of the leadership team, even though I run my own company full time. And so for me, I realized that there are so many things about corporate that we just don't know. And we assume that people know these things because they went to college. But what I've learned for sure is that the 4 things that matter the most in navigating corporate is your reputation, your resources, your relationships, and ultimately your resilience, because it is a long game, y'all. And there's a ton of stuff that we have to deal with. And as we grow this channel, I'll share more about my experiences and what I've gone through. And I hope to be able to help you decide how you can build a career that you are proud of. And ultimately, it's not to convince you to stay in corporate America, but to help you understand that while you are here, corporate is going to require a ton from you. So you want to make sure that you're getting as much as you're giving. And hopefully we'll get to do that together. But it's a little bit about me. Also, something that you guys should know is I talk really fast when I get excited. So some of the videos, I'm gonna be talking really, really fast, but I'm gonna try to calm that down. But it's been a while. It's been a labor of love, I think, getting the YouTube channel up. And I just can't wait to see how this changes the careers of the women who become part of this community. So great to see y'all. Great to meet you all. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.